If you want to visualize your analysis in a website, in this case, we are analyzing the cars. In this chart, you can see the different cars, Fiat, Volkswagen, with the horsepower and the MPG, which are columns from this data frame. To develop this application and run it in the web browser, we need to work with a code editor, in this case Visual Studio, that will execute these lines of code from the file app.py. We open the terminal, we use the command Streamlit run the file app.py that we have in this folder. We execute, and there we can see the web application. How to install the programs required to develop the application? I'll explain it to you in this tutorial step by step. The first steps are to install the programs. Visual Studio Code, we look for VS Code in Google, and also the Docker. We click on the link, we download the recommended file. For VS Code, we do the same. Download. You open the installer files and follow the recommended steps. I have the programs installed already, so I make sure that Docker is opened. There I have it, and now I open Visual Studio. The materials we will use in this tutorial are in the website's GitHub, this repository. I click on code, I download the zip, I open the folder, I make sure that the file is uncompressed. In Visual Studio, I drag and drop the folder. I open the file app.py. To execute the lines of code from the file app.py, I need to use the terminal and execute the command streamlit run and the name of the file app.py. I execute, but I get an error, the command not found Streamlit, which is the program that we use at the beginning of the command. We get this error because the library Streamlit is not installed in this Python. How can we use Docker and Dev containers to install the required packages and not have any errors in the terminal? If you see Dev container folder, we have a JSON file and a Docker file. In the JSON, we have the instructions to set up a virtual computer in our local computer to install all of the applications. You can see that the Docker file that will be executed is called Docker file, which is the one that we have in the folder. At the beginning, they start with an image from Microsoft. What is a Docker image? In this diagram, we are the Docker client. We want to create a container, a virtual computer, a virtual machine, from the instructions which are gathered in Docker images. These images contain the instructions to install some of the required programs such as Linux, Python, Visual Studio, or any other that we may need. In our case, we start with the Visual Studio image for dev containers using Python version 3.10. The following line of code is copying all of the files that we have in our computer to the new virtual computer we are about to create in our local computer. In that virtual computer, we need to install some Python libraries to work with our applications, in this case Streamlit. So we install requirements file, which is the file that we have here with the required Python packages. Then we create a kernel to work with Python in a Jupyter notebook, and we would have the programs required to start developing the Streamlit application. How to execute this JSON file, dev container? First, we need to install the extensions for the container. We see here dev containers. We click on install. In my computer is already installed, and follow the recommended steps. Once you have it, you'll go to the dev container JSON, open the command palette, look for container and the command rebuild without cache and reopening container. We click here. Now the new virtual computer will be created. If we see the process in the terminal, we are installing all of the required Python packages. Now the container is ready to be executed. So to run this file of code with these lines, we create a new terminal by clicking here. If some message appear here, it's recommended that you follow the steps. In the terminal, now if we use the command Streamlit, we don't get any errors because in the requirements file we had the package Streamlit to work with this library. Now we execute the command streamlit run app.py, which is the file that we have in the folder to execute the analysis of the cars. We execute. The application will be running in a port, which is a local direction in our computer that can be opened in a web browser. And finally, we see the application with the analysis. If you want to make some changes, you can go back to the application, write another words, for example, hello world, go back to the application, always rerun, and there you will see the new text. Now it's time for you to replicate these steps and start developing Streamlit applications using VS Code with dev containers.